Todd Talks. Todd Talks.
Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Todd Talks. And today's guest is someone who is helping shape the future of enterprise computing. Gunnar Hellekson is Vice President and General Manager of Red Hat Enterprise Linux, which is the core of everything we do here at Red Hat. So increasingly, this voice at the center of Red Hat is becoming more and more important as we're starting to talk about AI and where companies are going strategically. So there's certainly no shortage of AI headlines today, and every organization wants to make sure they're on the edge and moving faster and unlocking all of the value. But Gunnar's been making some important points about before organizations can realize the power and the utility of all of these new tools that are coming to bear, we have to take a look at what our foundation is built on and how we're going to strategically move forward into this space, or we're just going to repeat the errors of the past. So Gunnar, welcome, and it's great to have you with us.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
So I have a lot of questions because we can take this in a lot of directions. So we'll just jump right in. So you meet with a lot of customers, and I think it's those stories from the field that really resonate with people, and folks feel like sometimes they need to hear what's going on with their neighbors before they want to make a move. So when you're talking to people right now, there's excitement and there's pressure to move quickly. What are you saying to CEOs and CIOs that are feeling that pressure? What's the first thing that you're going to tell them?
Well, the first thing I tell them is that any plan that they set in place is going to change probably in a matter of weeks or months. Especially AI, the space is moving. Everything about the space is moving more quickly. The capability of the models is changing on a regular basis. The capability of the hardware is changing on a regular basis. What a best practice looks like changes what seems like quarterly. So the most important thing is to stay flexible and to do what you can to ready your organization for whatever changes are coming in the future.
Yeah. Change resilience and the pace of change, right? A lot of these sort of DevOps lessons learned, right? They're coming back around
That's
again. For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
So,
that's right.
a lot of organizations maybe, experimented with AI over the past year, didn't quite get to the value proposition they were looking for, or maybe hit some roadblocks. What are you seeing that separates sort of the organizations that are truly ready and sort of, adapting AI in production, and those that sort of are just sitting back and waiting?
Yeah. So the most important thing I think for an organization to do when they're embarking on this journey is actually to decide what success looks like, because there is no such thing as like AI use versus not AI use. It's going to be levels of use, or there's going to be there's gradients in them. It's a spectrum. At the bottom of that spectrum is kind of I think what somebody called I really enjoy this, spicy autocomplete, right? And so it's really it's a productivity tool, right? So it's gonna, instead of me doing grammar checks on my Google Doc, it's gonna go help me write paragraphs in my Google Doc. Okay, that's fine. That's at the level of AI as a productivity tool. And that's true for, productivity office workers as well as for developers, right? And you'll get a certain marginal improvement out of that. Over the last 6 months, we've seen, especially since the beginning of the year, actually, we've seen this grown interest in AI agents, which is to say an AI that's connected to tools, probably connected to a memory, and this thing can actually work on our behalf. That has forced a lot of organizations to think deeply about, if you want to automate a process, you first have to understand the process that you're automating, right? And so I know in my own experience with this internally, it is, of course, we wrote strategy documents and we have operational plans and we've got our OKRs and all these other things. And of course, it's all humans involved. It's humans writing it and humans reading it. And so you get a little sloppy sometimes. Things kind of lag, or there's a little bit of retconning of what your goals were and things like that. Like, that's all normal organizational stuff. If you put an AI in place, or if you put an AI agent in place, it is absolutely unforgiving about what the ground truth is supposed to be. And it is important to all organizations need to set that ground truth. And that could look like, what is your strategy? What is your operational plan? How are you structured? What is everybody's job? And then going into the project work, like, what is the goal of the project? What are the outcomes? The specification for requirements. The more pre-work you do before you bring an AI agent to bear, the better the outcome is going to be. And so I see people spending at least as many calories on that pre-work, foundational, kind of constitutional setting as they do on which agent am I going to use and which harness and where am I going to run the harness and what models am I going to use, because those are all instrumental. And to the extent you invest in that early phase, you get a much better outcome in the second phase.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that it's like the old adage, right? Garbage in, garbage out, right?
Yeah,
You
exactly.
start on a bad foundation and you end up in a bad place.
That's
So
right.
let's maybe zoom in on the foundation a little bit. You talk about sort of the infrastructure layer as the
Yeah.
foundation for your AI.
Mhm.
And apart from trying to procure GPUs, which is on everybody's mind these days, like that's maybe not the first place that people look, right? Maybe they look to their data, they look to their dev teams, or they're looking at their people or their capabilities.
Yeah.
What do you mean when you're saying AI ready infrastructure, and why has that
Yeah.
become so important?
Yeah. So there is especially in an early stage of a technology, and we saw this back in containers, we saw this back in virtualization, back in cloud. There's all of these, we see a similar pattern in all these cases where a new technology is brought to bear or a new pattern is brought to bear, and everyone decides we're going to throw away everything that we did before and we need to start brand new. It's just going to completely clean slate. We're going to go start what amounts to a second duplicative infrastructure with the one that we already have in place. And the truth is that, especially for AI, you will very quickly discover that all the things that you need out of your AI infrastructure are the things that you needed out of your infrastructure in the first place. So you need things like reliability, and you need security, and you need security controls in place, and you need auditability, and you need performance, and you need to be able to support a variety of hardware. All of these things, which should sound eerily similar to all of the selection criteria that you had for an operating system before you started the AI project. And so from an operating system point of view, at least in the RHEL business, we think about AI as, honestly, it's just another workload for us, right? It's another workload like a database or like a web server, and it has certain performance requirements, it has certain security requirements, and it has certain infrastructure requirements, in particular, being able to support accelerated GPUs. Which isn't to say that there's not work to do. So one of the most important announcements we made recently was our partnership with NVIDIA, where NVIDIA is a very remarkable company in many dimensions. But from an operating system point of view, one of the most interesting things about NVIDIA is the pace at which they are delivering new hardware, which is about once a year. They release a brand new architecture. As an operating system, it's incumbent on us to support that architecture. So that means supporting a brand new architecture once a year. We have been pretty comfortable supporting a brand new version of Red Hat Enterprise Linux every 3 years. NVIDIA, if you like, is now operating inside the traditional RHEL loop. And so we had this kind of impedance mismatch between the two cycles. So we know that NVIDIA is an extremely important hardware partner. And so what we did is create a program under which we can enable brand new NVIDIA hardware as soon as it is available on a fast-moving Red Hat Enterprise Linux vehicle. So the idea is you can, if you want to get the latest and greatest from NVIDIA, you can run RHEL. It's going to be moving very quickly over time. But eventually, all of that enablement for that hardware will eventually land in main RHEL. So maybe you want to sit on RHEL for NVIDIA for 18 months or so. And then after those 18 months, regular RHEL gets the support. And it's very relatively easy to switch over to the kind of traditional enterprise lane of Linux, right? And so in this way, you can maintain your application dependencies, you can maintain your stack, but you're running a special flavor of RHEL just for NVIDIA that eventually turns into mainline RHEL. And in this way, you don't have to choose between, you don't have to change your entire operating system plan just to support the NVIDIA hardware.
Perfect. I think that's amazing. And it actually harkens back to kind of the open source multi-stream collaboration model that's in our DNA, right? Like that's kind
Yeah,
of
yeah, that's right.
right.
That's
And so,
right. And and Todd, you'll see that same pattern because it's not just NVIDIA who is messing with everyone's comfortable enterprise cadence. It's also the cloud providers do the same thing, right? So you also saw us make announcements around RHEL for AWS, RHEL for Google, RHEL for Azure, and all of these are of a part of kind of partner-specific versions of RHEL that do not diminish the RHEL compatibility promise, but actually expand the coverage of the amount of hardware that RHEL can run on.
right, right. Gives that specific fork to your specific use case. That makes brilliant sense.
Yeah.
While we're on the open source topic, maybe we'll zoom out a little bit. And,
Sure.
because open source has been at the heart of Red Hat's success for decades, and it's also having a really interesting moment right now, with the, mythos and a lot of the attack vectors that are getting, capitalized on by
Yeah.
AI. Where
Yeah.
do you believe the open source strength is in this new
Yeah.
AI era? How do you think that's going to play out?
Yeah. So to answer the question, I think we first have to understand the problem, which actually predates Mythos considerably. Um, Even before the release of Mythos, we saw that the distance between discovering a security problem and being able to fix a or being able to exploit a security problem, that distance was a very safe feeling 200 days, 220 days, something like that. That was as recently as 10 years ago. Over time, that distance has compressed considerably. So now, depending on who you ask, that distance is as bad as 4 hours or even -7 days, meaning anytime that we discover a vulnerability, on average, it has already been exploited for a week, right?
Right.
But meanwhile, we never really, as an industry, we never really changed how we treated CVE response, right? It was always, okay, we'll do the criticals and we'll do the importance, and then the lows we'll kind of ignore and things like this. And that was an agreement we all made. That when Mythos showed up, it taught us that this trend was not going to improve, that it was in fact going to accelerate and get worse. And this idea that we could classify things into critical, important, moderate, low was an emotionally satisfying fiction. Right? It made us feel more comfortable, but it did not actually improve our security posture at all, because what Mythos taught us is that a sufficiently intelligent AI can string together low severity problems and turn them into, as a whole, as a collective, they turn into a critical problem. And so now all the rules that we wrote for ourselves around what responsible security response looks like is currently being changed. And so in the meantime, open source software is now 60 to 70% of the average enterprise stack. We have, as a 20-year Red Hat veteran, I'm very chuffed to be able to say that open source is definitely one. Mm-hmm. So congratulations to us. And now we own 60 to 70% of the stack. Now, for what we call the foundational 10%, where Red Hat Enterprise Linux lives, where OpenShift lives, you have a security response team and you have products and you have a vendor who's going to be able to fix your problem for you if you have a vendor for your operating system. But for that 60 to 70% that lives on top, these are application dependencies, these are libraries, frameworks that your developers use in order to accomplish the task. There is no vendor in many cases to you. And we have been, I'll uncharitably call it free riding, but we are taking advantage of the upstream open source activity and assuming that the upstream open source communities are maintaining the security of those components. Well, what those statistics I just told you tell us is that they have not, and if you listen to the open source communities nowadays, they find it very difficult to keep pace with this increasing volume and velocity of security vulnerabilities. Maintainers are already being showered with vibe-coded pull requests. They're being showered with requests to fix security vulnerabilities, and for popular projects, they're all having a hard time managing that volume. What that means is that you cannot rely on the goodwill of the open source community to ensure the security of your stack. And of course, there are many solutions to this problem, but one of which is the Lightwell project.
Right. So yeah, I mean, that's been top of mind for every Red Hatter right now. And for those watching who don't know what the Lightwell project is, basically, Red Hat is stepping up to the plate to help secure a lot of those dependencies and a lot of those, little fragments that we've all been depending on for decades. So I think from an app dev and library perspective, it's really crystal clear to me how Lightwell connects, but maybe it's into the Linux piece where it's a little more fuzzy for me. Could you connect all the dots and kind of maybe
sure.
picture for me?
Yeah, sure. So you're right in that we think about these as two separate problems because the number of promises and commitments that we make on our products, like Red Hat Enterprise Linux, is materially different than the kinds of promises we're going to make for Lightwell. So I mentioned that bottom 10%. For that bottom 10%, we know what security response looks like, and we know what the rules are going to be, and we know what the SLOs, SLAs, things like this. That's all kind of well understood. And for that, the intervention looks like being able to take Mythos and Mythos level models internally and bring them to bear on the products so that we can anticipate security problems before they're seen in the wild. And so all that work is well underway. And of course, the result for the customer is the same. We will file the CVE, we will issue the errata, we'll issue the fix, and so on. So everything looks scrutably normal on the product side. On the Lightwell side, things behave a little bit differently because the incentives are aligned differently. So the challenge with a lot of these is, first of all, we're talking about a lot more software, right? We're talking about the whole internet, right? And so how do you secure the whole internet? Well, you have to set some priorities, and you have to put a process in place, and you have to simultaneously keep a customer safe, but also keep the open source communities healthy and safe. And so this is one of the things I'm most proud of with Lightwell, is that I think we have a system put in place that serves both needs, and the incentives are aligned to make sure that they work correctly. So what that looks like is, let's say I'm a large bank. I have brought Mythos to bear on my code base, and I see tens of thousands of vulnerabilities. I probably have an opinion about which ones are most important or which are most critical to me. That probably looks 60, 80% about the same as my other peer banks. So I could, on my own, go report that vulnerability to the upstream community. Well, that might get me the result that I want, as long as the maintainer is not too busy. But I would also basically be telling on myself and announcing to the world that I have this vulnerability. Please come exploit me while I wait for the maintainer to fix it. Okay, not a great solution. The second solution is to fix it myself. I have Mythos. I have all these high-powered AI models. I will go fix this myself, and I will carry it for the rest of my career. I will fix this thing. And the important thing to understand here is that a lot of the fixes that we're talking about are not for the latest and greatest version of the upstream open source project. It is for something 3 years old. It is something for 5 years old. The open source community itself has probably long since moved on to more modern versions of their libraries. So the trick is, even if you can get their attention, they may not even be supporting the thing that you're running. So maybe you do have to fix it yourself. And now you are all alone, carrying it all by yourself. Well, your other 8 to 10 peer banks have the same library, they have the same problem. And because you're not able to talk to each other about this, you have 8 to 10 different versions. This is extremely wasteful. It's a bad use of everybody's time. So we need a way to get everybody collected. So that's the clearinghouse idea of Lightwell, is if I can get these 8 to 10 banks together to share their vulnerability information anonymously with each other, we can deduplicate, we can prioritize together, and we can collectively work on the solution to the problem. We could also speak with one voice to the upstream community so that maintainer is not getting 10 requests from 10 different banks. He's getting one request from a trusted source, which is the Lightwell project. And they know that Red Hat is behind it and IBM is behind it, and they probably know what they're doing. So I'm going to accept that fix. If the upstream community is not in a position to carry the fix, then Lightwell will carry it on our customer's behalf. So in this way, we protect the customer, we ensure the long-term security of the upstream open source projects, and we are able to. So using this, we are able to leverage everyone's intelligence in order to create a safer environment, both for our customers and for the upstream communities.
Absolutely. This is a big deal. Like I think it's almost impossible to understate what's actually happening right now.
Yes.
Like I don't think there's big enough expletives to go like, wow, this is a really big deal.
Yeah, this is well to the tune of when IBM announced it, kind of shocked everybody, including us internally, when they announced it's a 20,000 people and $5 billion investment on IBM and Red Hat's behalf, which is IBM is very good at these. We've done announcements like this in the past. We did $1 billion for Linux, right, back about 25 years ago. We've done so. This is a major strategic initiative for both Red Hat and IBM.
Absolutely. And looking ahead to, I think I want to just ask one last question, and this will be your
Mhm,
chance to get your crystal ball out, right? And take a look into the future.
mhm.
Maybe, whether it's a short term or long term, like when you're looking down the road, kind of what changes do you think are going to have the biggest impact on sort of the IT communities, whether it's the upstream open source communities or whether it's sort of those
Yeah,
big banks that you're talking about? Where
yeah,
do you see this playing out, and where do you see the biggest changes happening?
yeah. I think the biggest change that needs to happen has to do with we haven't talked at all about what happens after the patch becomes available, because this is actually where the industry needs to do the most work. Right now, the average organization could take up to 12 months to solve a critical vulnerability internally. And that has nothing to do with the availability of the fix. That has to do with the internal process of your change review board. And you have to manually go in and patch each one of the servers, et cetera, et cetera. Everyone kind of knows that they need to automate this process, but it is the reason it hasn't happened yet is because it is extremely difficult. Some of that is process stuff. Some of that is tool concerns. Some of that is architectural, right? It is difficult to deploy patches on a large scale using the traditional patching tools and approaches that we've built over the last 20 or 25 years. So this is one of the reasons why at Summit we announced Red Hat hardened images and Fedora Hummingbird Linux. These two are new ways of delivering the operating system experience to a customer. And they are image based as opposed to package based, which means that the shorthand for it is they can update your server in the same way that you update your iPhone, right? It downloads the fix overnight, and after a quick reboot or a quick reswizzle, you are now running on the new version of the thing. And if it doesn't work, that's okay. You'll fall back to a known good state and keep running. It is much more efficient to manage your patch cycles in this way. And the hope is that this is one of the tools you can use to kind of compress your patch cycles. Because remember, by the time a security vulnerability materializes, it is going to be, you have, what did I say, 4 hours, right, before it is exploitable, which means that the speed to remediation is actually the bottleneck. Lightwell can take care of your supply problem, but the demand end of this is where most of the innovation will have to happen. And so that means a lot of new processes, a lot of new tools, a lot of new approaches, which I think we're going to see all industries embrace over the next several years. It's going to be pretty exciting, and it's going to be a lot of work. It's going to be very expensive, but of course, our livelihoods depend on it.
For sure. Well, and a lot of things too, like you said, right? Everybody has been trying to sort of achieve a lot of these metrics over the last 2 decades, right? Sort of that mean time to release and mean time to recovery. I think those are more relevant now than ever, right? Like
Yeah,
that
yeah,
is sort of the two measures that if you've got those numbers going in the right direction, you're doing the right thing.
yeah, yeah. That's right.
So, Gunnar,
Yeah,
thank you so much for joining. It's been a pleasure.
yeah. Of course. Yeah, yeah. This is fun. Anytime.
And thanks to everyone for tuning in and joining us for another Todd Talks. We would love to hear from you. There's a comment section down below that we monitor regularly. And also feel free to share this link and get the word out. And if you have comments, we'll be responding. So looking forward to the chat. Thanks, everybody.